We're going to continue looking at factorising trinomials today, and we're going to be looking at examples that involve negative numbers and subtraction. So let's look at this first example. So here we have to factorise x squared add 2x subtract 3. We're going to be using the same method as we've done previously. So our first step is to multiply the coefficient of x squared and the last term. So the coefficient is the number that is in front of the x squared term. And here it doesn't look like there's anything in front of the x squared term, but however, in algebra, we don't tend to write the number 1. So that's 1x squared. So we've got the number 1, and we're going to multiply it by that last term, so negative 3. And it's now really important that we're involving this negative sign. So whatever sign is in front of your last term needs to be included. So we are doing 1 times negative 3. So 1 times negative 3 just equals negative 3. And now we need to think about the factors, and we need to write down the factors of this number. So here we have negative 3. We need to think about what two numbers times together to give us negative 3. So of course we've got 1 and negative 3, just like we have here. But we've also got negative 1 times positive 3. So those are our factors. Now we need to find the pair that multiply together to give us negative 3, and then add to give 2, so positive 2. So it's going to be one of these two pairs. So 1 subtract 3 gives us negative 3, so it's not going to be that one. And then negative 1 add 3 gives us positive 3. So it's this second set of numbers here. Now we need to rewrite the first expression using these numbers. So we're going to we're splitting up this plus 2 into our negative 1x plus 3x. So we'll get x squared negative, and then there's an invisible 1, we don't tend to write that, negative x plus 3x subtract 3. And then we need to split this expression straight down the middle, like this, and factorise each of these using a common factor. So if we look at the first part of the expression, we've got x squared subtract x, so we need to factorise this using a common factor. So we're going to take out a common factor of x to get x, and then x times x gives us x squared, then x times negative 1 gives us negative x. And then we need to factorise the second part, taking out a common factor, and this time our common factor will be 3. To get 3 times x gives us 3x, and then 3 times negative 1 gives us 3. So we need to use our skills of factorising using a common factor for this line. And once we've done that, we just need to write down our answer, and we need to figure out where the answer comes from. So looking at the terms on the outside of the bracket, so we've got x and then plus 3, that creates your first bracket, and then x minus 1 is our second bracket. If your two brackets at this stage are different, then you've made a little mistake somewhere, so these two brackets must always be the same. So if you realise that they're not the same, I would go back through and double check all your working so far. So x plus 3 is our first bracket, and then x subtract 1 is our second bracket. And that's the final answer. So remember as well that if you have the brackets round the other way, so x minus 1, x plus 3, that's correct as well. It doesn't matter which way around you write your brackets, just as long as you've got the terms inside the brackets are the same. Can you please use this example to help you and follow all the steps? And can you please factorise x squared plus 6x subtract 7? So if you pause now. Okay, let's go over the answer to this one. So our first step is to multiply the coefficient of x squared. In this case it's going to be 1. So multiply the coefficient with the last term, and we're including whatever sign is in front of the last term. So 1 times negative 7 will give us negative 7. And then we need to write down all the factors of negative 7. So obviously we've got 1 and negative 7 like we have here, but we've also got negative 1 and positive 7. Now we need to consider what pair of numbers multiply to give us negative 7 and then add together to give us positive 6. So 1 subtract 7 gives us negative 6. So then 1 add 7 will give us positive 6. So it's going to be that last pair of numbers. We now need to rewrite our expression. So we're going to have x squared, and then we're using our two factors here. So minus x and then plus 7x, and then the negative 7 just drops down. And we have split this straight down the middle so that we can begin to factorise. So we're going to factorise the first part of the expression by taking out a common factor of x. So you should have x bracket x subtract 1, and then factorising the last part of that expression by taking out a common factor of 7. So you should have plus 7 bracket x subtract 1. And lastly, we just need to pick out our final steps, our final brackets for the last part of our answer. So x plus 7 creates our first bracket, and then x minus 1 is our second bracket. So your final answer should be x plus 7, x minus 1. And remember, if you've got the brackets around the other way, that's absolutely fine as well. So well done if you got that. Okay, example 2. Here we have to factorise x squared, subtract 2x, subtract 15. You can see that we have two negative signs now, but we're still going to follow the exact same steps as before. So our first step is to multiply the coefficient of x squared with this last term, involving that sign that's in front of the last term. So we've got 1 times negative 5 to give us 1 times negative 15 to give us negative 15. We now need to write down all the factors of negative 15. So we've obviously got 1 and negative 15. We've also got negative 1 and positive 15. We've also got 3 and negative 5, and negative 3 and positive 5. So now we need to consider what pair of numbers multiply to give us negative 15, so one of these 4 pairs, and what ones add together to give us negative 2. So here we've got 3 subtract 5 does in fact give us a negative 2, so that's the pair we're going to use. Now we're going to rewrite our expression. So we're essentially splitting up this negative 2x to become plus 3x, negative 5x. Our x squared stays the same. We've got plus 3x, negative 5x, and then the negative 15 stays the same. We're then going to split this expression straight down the middle and factorise the first set of numbers by taking out a common factor of x to get x bracket x plus 3. We're then going to factorise this last bracket, and we need to consider these negative signs when we are taking out a common factor. So we're going to take out a common factor of negative 5. So negative 5 times x gives us negative 5x, and then negative 5 times positive 3 gives us negative 15. So really be careful with these using your integer skills. So once we have that, we're picking out our first bracket, which will be x subtract 5, and our second bracket, which will be x plus 3. So x subtract 5, x plus 3 is the final answer. So again, using this example to help you follow in each step, can you pause the video here and factorise x squared, subtract 3x, subtract 10. Okay, let's go through this one. So we have to multiply coefficient of x squared, which in this case is 1, times by the last term, including that sign, which is negative 10. So we've got 1 times negative 10 to give you negative 10. We're then going to write down all the factors, the factor pairs of negative 10. So we've got 1 times negative 10, negative 1 times positive 10. We've also got 2 times negative 5 and negative 2 times positive 5. So we now need to identify what pairs of numbers multiply to give us negative 10 and then add together to give us negative 3. So we're adding together to give us this middle term here. So going through the list, we can see that 2 subtract 5 will in fact give us negative 3. So we now need to use these two numbers to rewrite our expression. So we're essentially splitting up this negative 3x to become plus 2x, negative 5x. So we'll have x squared stays the same, plus 2x, subtract 5x, subtract 10x stays the same. We're then going to split this expression straight down the middle and factorise this first part and then factorise this last part. So we're going to have a common factor of x for the first section, x bracket x plus 2. We're then going to take out a common factor of negative 5. So negative 5 times x gives us negative 5x. Then negative 5 times positive 2 will give us negative 10. Again, we need to make sure that these two brackets are the same. If they're not the same, then go back, double check your negative signs just to make sure that they are. So now we need to identify our first bracket being x subtract 5, and our last bracket is x plus 2. So your final answer, x subtract 5, x plus 2. So well done if you got that. Okay, let's move on to a third example. This time we're factorising x squared subtract 6x plus 8. So this time we have, so our first example we had a positive then a negative. Second example we had two negatives. This time we've got a negative on our middle term and a positive last term. But again, we're still following the exact same steps. So let's multiply the coefficient of x squared, which in this case is 1, times positive 8 to give us 8. And then we're writing down all the factors of 8. So we've got 1 and 8, and we've also got 2 and 4. But we're trying to eventually add together to give negative 6. We can't possibly add two positive numbers to get a negative. So you, again, applying your integer skills and remembering the fact that two negatives, so a negative times a negative, will give you a positive answer. So another factor pair of 8 is negative 1 times negative 8, and also negative 2 times negative 4. So always consider your negative factor pairs as well when you're trying to get a positive answer. So this time we are, again, finding the pair that multiply together to give us 8, so it's going to be one of these pairs, and then add together to give us negative 6. And like we just mentioned, you cannot get a negative answer by adding two positive numbers. So these two first sets of numbers are irrelevant. So we're going to negative 1 add negative 8 gives us negative 9, so it's not going to be that one. Negative 2 add negative 4 does in fact give us negative 6. So that is the pair that we're after. We're then going to rewrite our expression by essentially splitting up this negative 6x to become negative 2x, negative 4x, to give us x squared, subtract 2x, subtract 4x, add 8. Same steps as before, split that straight down the middle, factorise that first part of our expression with a common factor of x to come outside the bracket. So x times x gives us x squared, x times negative 2 gives us negative 2x. This next part here, we need to consider our negative sign. So we're going to take out a common factor of negative 4. Negative 4 times x gives us negative 4x. Then negative 4 times negative 2 gives us positive 8. So be careful with your negative signs. Again, if your last bracket is not the same as your first, then go back and double check all your negative signs. And now we just need to identify our first bracket, which is x subtract 4, and then our last bracket, x subtract 2. And that's the final answer. So again, we are just following the same steps as before, but we're really being super careful with our negative numbers. So following this example, can you pause the video here and factorise x squared subtract 7x plus 6? Okay, let's go over the answer. So first step, as always, multiplying the coefficient of x squared, which is 1, with positive 6. Multiply them together to get positive 6. We are then going to write down all our factors of positive 6. So obviously we've got 1 and 6, 2 and 3. But because we're trying to then add together to give us a negative, we need to be considering our negative factor pair. So negative 1 times negative 6 will give us positive 6. Negative 2 times negative 3 gives us positive 6 as well. We now need to find the pair of numbers that are going to add together to give us negative 7, which is going to be this third set of numbers. So negative 1 add negative 6 will give us negative 7. So now we are rewriting this expression. So rewrite it, x squared stays the same, and then we're having subtract x, subtract 6x, add 6. We're then splitting that expression straight down the middle, factorising that first set using a common factor of x to get x bracket x subtract 1. Then factorising the second set, considering this negative sign. So we're going to have negative 6 and then bracket, well, negative 6 times x gives us negative 6x. And then negative 6 times negative 1 will give us positive 6. Picking out our first bracket for our final answer, we're going to have x subtract 6 in our first bracket, and then x subtract 1 in our second bracket. And that should be your final answer. So well done if you got that. Okay, let's move on to our fourth and final example. So this time we have a coefficient in front of a coefficient which is greater than 1 in front of our x squared term. But as before, we are always just following the exact same steps. So we're going to take that 7 and multiply it by -4, considering this negative sign in front of our last term. Multiply your coefficient of x squared with your last term. We now need to write down all the factors of -28. So we've got -1 and 28. We've also got +1 and -28. We've also got 7 and -4, like we have here. We've also got -7 and +4. And we also have 2 and -14, -2 and 14. So there could be lots of factors. As you are writing down these factors, I would always have in the back of your mind, well, I'm trying to add together to give us -27. So if you get so far and realise you've already spotted the pair, you don't need to go and write down every single pair of factors. So we need to find the pair that now add together to give us -27. So we've got -1 at 28 will give us +27, but 1 subtract 28 will indeed give us -27. So that is the factor pairs that we're going to be using. We're then going to rewrite our expression. So we're essentially splitting up this -27x to become plus x subtract 28x. So it looks like this. So our 7x squared stays exactly the same. Then we're splitting this up using our factor pairs. So we've got plus 1x. We don't write the 1, so we're just having plus x. And then subtract 28x. And then subtract 4 just stays the same. We're then going to split that straight down the middle and factorise like we have done before. So the first part of the expression, we're factorising 7x squared, add x, taking out a common factor of x. So we'll have x in bracket 7x plus 1. And then we're going to factorise this last part, again, making sure we take into consideration this negative number. So we're going to take out a common factor of -4. So -4 times 7x will give us -28x. Then -4 times plus 1 will give us -4. And again, these two brackets are exactly the same, meaning we've done all the right steps so far. So then picking out our first bracket, which is going to be x subtract 4. And then our last bracket is going to be 7x plus 1. So our final answer, x subtract 4 in the first bracket, 7x plus 1 in the last. So again, using this example to help you, can you pause the video here and factorise 3x squared, subtract 23x, subtract 8. Okay, let's go over the answer. So we are multiplying coefficient of x squared with the last term, including the sign that is in front of that last term. So we've got 3 times -8 to give us -24. We're then going to write down all our factors of -24. So we've got 1 and -24, -1 and +24, and so on. 4 and 6, for -4 and +6. We've also got 3 and -8, -3 and +8, and so on. But like I said previously, if you've spotted already, we're trying to get to -23 by adding. If you spotted it so far, you can stop writing down. You don't need to write down every single factor. So in this case, we're going to be using the first set of numbers. So 1 subtract 24 will give us -23. And then we're going to rewrite our expression. So the 3x squared stays the same. We're going to be splitting up -23x using our factor pairs. So we've got plus 1x, subtract 24x, and then -8 stays the same. We're then going to split that straight down the middle, taking out a common factor of x for our first set of numbers, so x bracket 3x plus 1, and then taking out a common factor, remember being careful with that negative sign, of -8, and then in brackets 3x plus 1. Identifying our first bracket, so x subtract 8 as our first, 3x plus 1 as our second, so your final answer should be x subtract 8, 3x plus 1. So well done if you got that.